Hello, and good afternoon. My name is Joe Forte. I'm a digital humanities specialist with Virginia Tech Publishing in the university libraries at Virginia Tech. I also coordinate activities in a suite of spaces in the main branch of the libraries, which we call the Athenaeum. The Athenaeum houses and stands among a complement of resources administered by Virginia Tech Publishing in partnership with the College of Liberal Arts and Human Sciences, and for the purpose of supporting teaching, learning, and creation in the digital humanities. Now, this includes a good bit of media production, which will be the central focus for the presentation I'll be making here today in partnership with my colleague, Corinne Guimont, who will now introduce herself and get us started.
Hi everyone, I'm Corinne Guimont. I'm the Digital Scholarship Coordinator in the libraries at Virginia Tech. I primarily work on digital humanities projects of all shapes and sizes and supporting faculty and students in their work with those. Today we're going to talk about how our podcasting initiative that Joe has primarily been working on fits into our digital humanities support program within Virginia Tech Publishing and the library. I'll get started with a little bit of background. Virginia Tech and the university libraries have been supporting publications of journals and open educational resources for several years. In 2017, Virginia Tech Publishing was established. So it's about 4 years old now, and around that same time in 2017, I started with Virginia Tech as a digital publishing specialist. Part of my position in that role was to specifically support digital humanities projects. Simultaneously, as I was getting started there, the libraries were also building and establishing the Athenaeum, the space that Joe just mentioned. This was under construction, quite literally. I remember when they were still building the space on our first floor of the library, and it's a suite of rooms designed to support digital humanities practice and pedagogy. There's a classroom that fits about 30 to 40 people with screens all around and audio connecting to the screens, as well as a conference calling feature. And then there's also a conference room with similar capabilities, but just one screen and a conference table. And then there's a recording suite that specifically focuses on providing a space for folks to do audio recordings such as podcast or oral histories. The room is soundproof and has a ton of equipment in there that I'll let Joe talk a little bit more about. But we also call it the media den. And then there's also an office space that we have kind of internally. The space was designed in collaboration with the College of Liberal Arts and Human Sciences, and we work very closely with them in how we use the space and ensuring that maybe semester-long classes are able to use it, as well as students and faculty for different research projects and purposes. Throughout 2017, we kind of focused on, and throughout 2017 and 2018, we focused on supporting the project aspect, so the small, large, medium projects that I primarily worked with, as well as establishing the Athenaeum and launching it and opening it. At the time, we had a digital humanities coordinator that helped manage that space and get everything started. In late 2018, the digital humanities coordinator and I established a DH librarians group, as we call it, and we pulled together different librarians across the library from different areas to focus on talking more about how we could support digital humanities as a whole. So we had folks from data services, special collections, and university archives, some teaching and learning librarians, as well as others who were just really interested in it. It was a great group. We were able to have some really meaningful conversations there, and that led to the development of a digital humanities status report and recommendations. So in early 2019, the digital humanities coordinator left, but I continued to work closely with the DH librarians group to create this status report and recommendations that really looked at all of the services we currently offered and where we could expand. One key area that we found that we could expand in was the podcasting and oral history recordings. The media den, that audio recording studio in the Athenaeum, was only used about a handful of times per semester, but there was still a really large need for large need and request for support for those projects at the university. So we were thinking, is there a way that we could get somebody in who could probably offer workshops or collaborate with teams to help them really make the most of that equipment? So in the fall of 2019, we established a position, the Athenaeum Coordinator and Digital Humanities Specialist, which would help manage that space and also really work towards developing these podcasting and oral history programs at the library and within Virginia Tech Publishing. Around that same time, my position changed to Digital Scholarship Coordinator, so I could really put more emphasis on the project piece, but more so focusing on the web-based projects. Also around the same time, there was one graduate digital humanities class happening in the Athenaeum, led by our digital humanities postdoc, Taisha Thompson, which I think had about half a dozen or so students, MFA creative writing students, who were told their assignment was to work together to create a digital humanities project. So they established a podcast, and they really used all of the spaces and tools in the Athenaeum. They had their class in the classroom. The students met for project meetings in the conference room, and they used the media den to record their podcast episodes. At the end of the semester, they put together a proposal, kind of following our book proposal format, to submit to Virginia Tech Publishing to request for additional support after their class was over. Fortunately, at that time, Joe was also starting with us, so it was a perfect transition to get us started into podcasting within Virginia Tech Publishing. And with that, I will hand it over to Joe.
Thanks, Corinne. So let me begin with MF Angle, since that is where Corinne left off. But by way of just a bit more background on my role. Before shifting into this current position with Virginia Tech Publishing, I had been working on other things within the libraries. Now, these were myriad, but they included some media-related enterprises, recording oral history narratives, hosting an interview format radio show for the libraries on the student-run station, 90.7 FM WUVT, and even exploring how podcasting might work in an academic context. These explorations were largely disorganized until the Introduction to Digital Humanities course that launched MF Angle. The instructor of that course, Taisha Thompson, invited me to consult with her students during their podcasting assignment, and I ended up serving as a kind of producer and sound engineer on the 4 episodes they created. So when I took the job with publishing and the MF Angle team wanted to continue, it was a relationship that was tailor-made to test and tweak the vision I was bringing with me into the Athenaeum. What I wanted to do was to build the media production capacity in that space sufficiently to support podcasting teams and projects derived from the work of faculty and students in the College of Liberal Arts and Human Sciences, and also from around and across the university. And to style these relationships on those Virginia Tech Publishing had cultivated with traditional authors and editors. So after a couple of months on the job, courting partners, buying microphones, in March of 2020, I had several teams in development and the ability to offer organizational, production, and editing support in whatever capacity these teams needed or wanted. So if March of 2020 sounds at all familiar to you, it's probably because that is when a global pandemic told everybody to stay home, and especially to stop gathering in rooms as small as our 8x10 media den. Yeah, so Virginia Tech Publishing, as a component of its broader attempts to push academic publications beyond traditional forms and formats, about 1 year or one pandemic ago, had begun its exploration into academic podcasting. So in one sense, podcasting is a fairly low-hanging fruit on that tree, a fairly accessible exploration into the alternative. Still, podcasting in the academy can and did present some unique challenges. Sure, there was the pandemic and shifting the whole thing into a remote operation. On that, I'll be happy to go into more detail during Q&A, but for now it's just a bit too convoluted to get into in any detail. And there's also the bureaucracy and the institutional inertia to deal with. On this, I won't be quite as happy, but if you have questions, we can get into those too during Q&A. What I would prefer to close with here is a word or two about an obstacle that is a bit more abstract, harder to nail to the wall, but intriguing and part of what I think is an important conversation to have. So there's a kind of historical weight behind the notion that real scholarship is typed and published between two covers. Granted, this is something that is daily subverted by practitioners of the digital humanities and by other mixed media, multimodal, and collaborative knowledge creators, but it still has weight. And don't get me wrong, with good reason. As one walks the razor's edge between accessibility and erudition in one's scholarship, one must strive to preserve the rigor and accountability by which research scholarship holds its value and relevance. It's a point I always try to make with students. There are 3 reasons your instructor has created this podcasting assignment, I like to tell them, and none of those is that the world needs another podcast. First, it is an exercise in literacy, digital literacy, media literacy, how to produce and consume communication effectively. Second, and most central to the point here, I want them to know that they are being asked to create a piece of scholarship. And to know that just because they are speaking into a mic rather than typing on a keyboard, it doesn't mean they don't need to make a clear, strong, and contextualized argument supported by evidence that they can trace to vetted sources. They do have to do those things because it is scholarship. And the third thing is that in all that, they should tell a good story. And it's within the space between these latter two, the scholarship and the story, that a podcaster will explore some of the ways in which the medium really can shape the message. Now, I think a publishing department that says it wishes to push beyond traditional forms and formats should be prepared to say why. Should be prepared to answer the question that's potentially on the lips of their authors and editors. What's in it for me? Or more precisely, what's in it for the work? I don't think that it's about the accessibility afforded the work by a more popular platform as is podcasting. There's a little of that, but what I believe is more important, what I think the scholars who have chosen to explore the potential of a podcast series with me believe, is that there is a distinct kind of knowledge created, a generative power in telling the story within the scholarship, the story of the scholarship, or the scholarship as a story. In a podcast, one confronts new media and new modes or arenas of expression, which can in turn inspire new ways of conceptualizing, engaging, and talking about the work. For example, highlighting, even performing, the social relationships that animate something like the translation of theory into action within communities of care, which is what's happening in the episodes I am producing for one of my strongest shows, Standpoints, a podcast on Black feminisms. For the Standpoints team, their work is very personal, and in a podcast where intimate conversations can be responsible for a good deal of the heavy lifting, a space is naturally provided in which that aspect of the scholarship can shine. It's one thing to read about communities of care, practices of care, pedagogies of care, but it is another thing altogether to experience that care within the hope, fear, the love, anger, sorrow, humor, and joy carried in the voices of women who are invested in those communities, in those practices, and in those pedagogies. I'm not saying that's a better thing, scholarship-wise, just that it is just that, another thing, another wrinkle in the complexity of the knowledge we are all chasing and creating, and maybe leaning in a bit into the humanity within the humanities. Now, we've got a lot of projects in varying states of development. MF Angle is published. You can find it on Apple, Google, Spotify, elsewhere. Standpoints is on deck, ready to go. A bunch of others are in a bunch of different places. If you would like to peek in on the progress, you can check for updates at our website, publishing.vt.edu, or contact Corinne or myself directly. And thank you so much for your time today.